You are listening to Keep Canada Weird, a weekly weird news roundup by the Nighttime Podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to my weekly Keep Canada Weird discussion series. If you're new here and Keep Canada Weird, my pal Aaron Airport and I seek out and explore some of the more offbeat Canadian news stories from the past week. In tonight's episode, which we recorded on the foggy night of October 23rd, 2022, Aaron and I continue to gaze into the darkness that is the Halloween celebration. Our discussion will feature a public hanging in Montreal. We'll look at Canada's top 10 haunted locations, and we'll hear the story of a floating coffin. So let's get to it. Scarin' Airport.
Scarin' Airport. Okay.
I was waiting for you to react to that.
It took me a millisecond to just kind of dawn on me what the heck you were saying. Scarin' Airport.
Handsome, evil Scarin' Airport. How you doing tonight?
So now I'm like stuck for something to call you. I wasn't pre-prepared like you were for a Halloween-based name to call you.
Yeah, I had a moment. How about Jordan Blown Apart?
No, that's not Halloween-y. That's worse. That's different. I don't like that at all. No, it's graphic.
Okay, well, yeah, you're right. And that's actually going to be our segue to what we're going to talk about shortly.
Yeah.
You can go with, the Dracula kind of thing, Jordan Vaughn Apart.
Jordan Vaughn Apart.
Or Jordan Bones Apart.
How about I just say Jordan? Ooh. There, yeah, that's your name.
I like it. Do you got the Halloween spirit? Like, have you been taken over by the warm, fuzzy feelings of death and decay?
Yeah, it's really fuzzy. Yeah, I'm filled with fuzz right now.
Do you have any decorations? Like, is your house looking spooky? Is anything?
No, man, it's not. And
really? It's a shame.
Yeah, it is. I'm like, I want to, but I just don't have the energy to do it, I guess.
I'm full. I'm all in. We got a graveyard in the front yard. We got a big, you call them,
like the inflatable
things that have inflatable thing. We got an inflatable pumpkin, and we're going to start doing more. It's like the next week is all about like building up to that big day.
Yeah.
Where we're going to have our house looking great. We're going to go door to door, and we're going to get so much candy that we're all going to need fillings in multiple teeth.
Yeah, well, I mean, last year I didn't get a lot of kids. I do enjoy handing out treats and seeing the costumes and et cetera, Halloween. But last year was my first year in the house. I only got 4 kids, I think. So I'm not expecting a tidal wave of children this year coming to the door. And I don't really see people in the neighborhood decorating as well. So it doesn't really give me the ambition to do it.
It sounds like they're giving up down there. That's not cool.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe it's you don't want to draw too much attention in my neighborhood. Maybe you're just asking for it by decorating for Halloween.
Is it haunted? Is it cursed?
The entire neighborhood?
Yeah.
Sort of, yeah,
As a death
I guess.
Curse.
Yeah, in a way.
Wow. Well, if it is haunted, we probably will be talking about it tonight because I got big plans for us here.
Yeah. We're going to be an exciting episode.
We're going to be keeping Canada weird, but we're also going to be keeping it pretty darn spooky. But before we get into that, we got one piece of listener feedback, which is more so a question that I think right off the bat we need to address. And I'm curious how you're going to respond to this. Because it's a very good question. And this question comes from a listener. This listener's question is a question that many listeners from around the world have for us.
Okay.
Here's what Sarah says.
Hi there. My name is Sarah. I come to you from south of the border in a wood-paneled 1950s basement in Seattle, Washington. And the question that I have for you is, how can I, as a Seattleite, help keep Canada weird? Because it's the middle of the night, I'm making art in my basement, and I'm just listening to episode after episode of Keep Canada Weird, and I feel deeply invested in Canada being weird. So let us know how we, south of the border, can help in the efforts. Farewell.
And not just south of the border, north, south, and east and
and
west of the
as
border.
well.
My response to that is what I always enjoy hearing from listeners is their perceptions and thoughts on what Canada is based on what makes it outside of the country. So we had the woman from, I think it was from Australia, who went to Tim Hortons on our quote unquote recommendation and sent us that voice memo in about it. But I guess anytime anyone internationally comes across anything Canadian, let us know and we will audit it if it is accurate and true. Maybe that's a good way we can do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think?
Keeping an eye out for any kind of Canadian weird things that blow across the border. The wind can take some things over there. But the best thing you can do to help, help Keep Canada Weird is to listen to Keep Canada Weird and support the show. So that way, the more support that we get internationally, the more weird stories we're going to seek out in Canada.
Yeah. Well, good answer, Aaron. Well, let's get to it. As you know, and as we always bring up, we have a mandate to highlight weird, wonderful, and unusual things across Canada. With it being that we're recording this on the 23rd of October, we're fully engulfed in a storm of Halloween frights and chills and thrills. So that's what we're going to be focusing on tonight. But first, I want to take kind of like a zoomed out look at Halloween and where it is today in a post-COVID, post-pandemic world. The last, I think, 2 Halloweens have been stabbed and massacred by COVID. It has made it harder to go door to door. And, some people were uncomfortable having trick-or-treaters and such. There were less Halloween parties, so less people getting dressed up and getting drunk with their friends at different places. So I want to kind of take a look at where we are today. The best way to do that is a recent news report all about Halloween spending.
Right.
So let's listen in on this.
For the Richard family, Halloween is having them reach deep into their pockets.
Especially this year. Last year we didn't spend as much, but this year we did.
The family says everything is more expensive when it comes to bringing their best fright to Halloween night.
There's a lot of accessories that go with the costumes too, so all the add-ons you gotta get and
then we're gonna take them to Heritage Park for Halloween's.
HelloSave collected data from Statistics Canada and the Retail Council of Canada. It says Canadians will spend about $1.64 billion on Halloween this year, up from last. It equates to about $87 per person. That's a welcome sign for this Halloween Alley store.
Things are picking up. Shipping is finally starting to come around, so our stock is starting to arrive. I mean, it's hard to say if people are willing to spend more. Like, disposable income seems to be less and less all the time, right? But
Gurinder Marwaha says many are going back to Halloween staples for costumes as sales ramp up.
Like last year, it was all Squid Games, Money Heist, right? So there was like set themes kind of that everybody was after. This year it's kind of a mixed bag. People are kind of going back to the classics like Ghostface, new Halloween movie coming out, so Michael Myers is big this year. We get the hardcore people coming in early September and stuff and getting their stuff early. But generally the last couple of weeks of October is when things really go crazy.
Tyson is at Halloween Alley in the Northeast tonight. Tyson, costumes are what many are spending their money on.
Yeah, Tara, about half a person's budget every year is spent on a costume, so about $41 this year. But new data out of the U.S. says that candy is also on the rise by about 13% in price, of course, just due to inflation. Now, here in Canada, though, we're expected to spend about $22 on those sugary treats for Halloween night. Tara?
Okay, Tyson, thank you.
The forecast, according to those experts, $1.6 billion spent in Canada on Halloween. That is a shocking number.
I was surprised by that last thing on the report, which says that people are expected to spend $22 on treats. I find that quite low. Do you?
Well, maybe that's on average because some people don't take part at all. So
I guess it is the average.
But I certainly I'm spending at least $50 a year, I would say.
I say at the least, and some people, who get 150, 200 children in their neighborhood they're probably spending hundreds of dollars. But yeah, I guess the average, but $22 seems low to me. That's seems like a
Certainly.
low average.
That's like a bag of chips or whatever for 30
Yeah,
kids or
you're not
40
making
kids or
a
something.
treat bag for those kids.
No, and the number they gave as well is that the average person, the average Canadian, I think the number they said was like $86 or whatever
Yeah.
is spent. That includes
A
a costume and
costume, which
everything.
I also find that low too, because
Mhm.
I don't dress up often for Halloween, but the times that I do, you go to the thrift stores, you kind of pick up pieces of your costume and you build it yourself, or, and by the time it's all said and done, you're $80-$90 in at least.
Easily, yeah. And I find I don't know about saying every year, but nowadays it's the quality and the amount of money spent on a costume seems so much higher. When we were younger, like it would just be like kind of like a mask or something basic. But now with kind of like cosplay being a thing, I feel like people really ramp it up. The people who go out and and put on a crazy costume like can take it pretty far.
Yeah,
But
we used to wear
but either
those really plastic ones that would rip really easy, like a
yeah.
plastic Superman with an awful generic mask or whatever it was, when they were not even built to last the night, let alone to reuse at another Halloween.
Yeah, but either way, I'm glad to hear that it's bouncing back. Like every industry has been affected by the stuff that has happened over the last several years, and not only do things that involve like a public get together, like Halloween for the most part, but also like the shipping and inventory and all this kind of stuff. It's just made it kind of an uphill battle to keep Halloween what it should be. And I think, this is the year to go big.
Yeah,
go
and maybe
home.
Halloween's finally going to have a bit of a comeback, because even leading up to COVID, I found that Halloween, well, I guess the act of trick or treating was kind of slowly declining, and from what
Yeah.
I could see in neighborhoods in my area. So I don't know.
I see the same thing here. Just the kind of the culture of it is different. I think people maybe aren't as comfortable going door to door and taking candy from people nowadays
Yeah,
as
Halloween
our
turns to
parents
more
were.
into like a family event or an event with friends, and the act of going to strangers' houses asking for candy is it's a bit 1950s,
Maybe, yeah. Let this be our segue. Speaking of strangers' houses, speaking of Halloween making a comeback, we talked a little bit about decorations and how much money's being spent. I want to kind of focus the show on something that's happening in Montreal. A certain home's decorations have led to quite a bit of controversy, and have people asking the question, how far is too far when it comes to Halloween decorations? I will say that my decorations around my house, I wouldn't say are on like the violent and gory side, but I do have a whole bunch of pretty realistic looking headstones and graves and stuff. But before I play the clip, what are your thoughts on Halloween decor? Like, what would be appropriate decorations for a yard?
Well, obviously, skeletons, gravestones, pumpkins, like your standard stuff. And people do get creative with their decorating, and so you'll see some clever things, but this one is definitely one to talk about.
Yeah, let's play the clip and then we'll talk about it.
A controversial decoration in Hunsik is getting a lot of attention. A homeowner has decided to put up a hanged dummy in a tree. As Billy Shields reports now, reaction is mixed.
On a usually quiet street in Hunsik, a somewhat macabre Halloween decoration is getting all the attention.
People with the car stop and big love and taking picture and going.
It's the first time I see it. I think it looks really cool.
It's an effigy hanging from a tree put up by Matthew Farah.
Halloween's been dying out lately. It's getting colder, less kids are going out, so we're just trying to bring it back to life,
Farah says the reaction from people he's talked to about his decoration has been positive.
Our people don't notice. Some people are like, oh my God, I can see it. They'll stop, take pictures, and carry on with their day.
Now, Farah says this installation is being done in the spirit of Halloween, but not everyone who lives in the area thinks the effigy is appropriate.
It's great that people could do lots of decoration for Halloween, but personally I think it was really bad taste in my opinion. I mean.
And some look at Farah's front yard with studied concern.
This effigy would absolutely be prone to triggering people's memories of lynchings, that there's a horrible history in the world of lynchings, of suicide, people hanging themselves to death, and people have had personal experiences or just a historical aspect of either is horribly upsetting for many people.
Farah recently added a disclaimer of sorts to the installation, recently putting this sign on the tree after he says police paid him a visit.
Not that much, it's fake, it has nothing to do with anything, no suicides, it's just decoration. It's clearly fake. I don't know how you can tell.
And while that may be true for the hanging dummy, the debate it's generating is certainly real. Billy Shields, CTV News.
Oh, yeah. I almost wish I had my son down here. I considered having him sit in on this to let me know what he thought about that. But yeah. I almost I had second thoughts being like, I don't really want him seeing that. And then I, from there, kind of thought about how other people may feel. And yeah, I'm all for Halloween and decorations and keeping it spooky. And I don't want to be a party pooper, but I certainly think like a realistic looking body hanging from a tree above a sidewalk on a busy street is maybe just a step too far.
It's a little far, yeah, because it is very realistic looking. I wouldn't assume it was real, obviously, if I was walking down the street, given the season that we're in, with Halloween just around the corner, I would be like, okay, someone's got a Halloween decoration up that's fairly graphic, but okay, it wouldn't bother me specifically. But if I had children, yeah, I'd be bothered by it.
Yeah, and it's people who are listening that haven't seen the photos. Again, it very much looks like a body, like it has the right kind of shape and proportions of a body, but it has like kind of a hood over the head that's covered in blood. So it looks like, I don't know, what would have happened is someone got their face beat in and then someone threw a hood over their head and they hung them from a tree outside the house.
Yeah, the body in particular looks, at first glance, it looks quite real.
Yeah, and where it is hung it's hung quite high up from a tree, but it hangs over a busy sidewalk. So you'd be walking under the body, walking down the sidewalk. And just as you said, my thought is if I have a 4 and a 9-year-old, either one of them would be uncomfortable by that. Yeah. Seeing that. And my thought about Halloween is, in every holiday, like as an adult, it's great to enjoy it, but those holidays, I don't know if this is me as a parent, but primarily like the holidays are for children and for younger people to enjoy. And if your decoration, especially your public decoration, goes so far as to, make kids upset, then you've gone too far. Something like if we had like a private party where it's all adults, that's a different time where you can, really go crazy. But something on your front lawn, I think you need to keep it to like pumpkins and skeletons.
Yeah, or something that's obviously like, if it was a skeleton hanging from the tree, that would be a little different. But the realism of it, sure, a Hollywood, makeup artist didn't put this together, but it's real enough looking that I don't think a young child would really understand what they were seeing, and it would be quite a graphic image for them. And in a public street, you have to, it's your Halloween decoration or whatever, but you have to be cautious of what you're putting out there.
Yeah, it's true. And it just like you say, it's your choice, your yard, your decoration, do what you want. But ultimately, I think this guy, if he could, who owns this home, if he could kind of take a step back maybe and look at it from some other people's points of view, maybe he'd be like, I'm going to put that in the backyard instead of the front yard.
Because it's not like you can just not unsee it, right? It's not like, well, if you don't like that music, don't listen to it. Or if you find that television show offensive, don't watch it. That, you can get behind that argument a little bit. But this is a public street where people are walking with their families and they have no choice but to see it.
Well, I think what you just said kind of, you said it's not like music, but I think the analogy you could use here is, let's say if you had music that had the most like adult lyrics, like, you know, every second word was an F-bomb kind of thing, would it be appropriate to have the speakers in your window blasting towards the road as kids were walking
No, I just
by?
more mean in the sense of, I guess I'll stick to the television show analogy. You know, if there's a television show you find very offensive, you just simply do not watch it. No, you know, nobody is forcing you to watch a television show that's offensive and seeing the what you deem to be offensive imagery on that show. But this is a public street with this hanging there for everyone to have no choice but to see.
Yeah. In the article, they talked about some people being triggered by it's, you know, the reminder of like lynchings, but they also mentioned suicides. And I do know I'm going back years ago in my life. Somebody that I was close with a long time ago had a family member whose sibling ended their life, died by suicide, and it was a hanging that did it. But I remember this time where we're a group of us were together. I think we were at a movie. I can't remember what movie it was, but there was a scene in the movie where somebody was hung, and the person whose sibling died by suicide with hanging was very like upset by it. And so when I saw this article, I immediately thought like, oh man, like this is something that if that person had walked under, it would bring back, you know,
Absolutely,
one of their darkest memories.
Absolutely, and we have to be
Halloween
considerate of that.
Isn't about
yeah,
that.
Halloween is fun. Like there's not a lot of fun about extremely graphic imagery that is very violent looking and disturbing. Like again, you know.
But not to say that there isn't a time and a place for it.
Of course,
There's certainly
of course.
a Halloween party that is attended
Or
by
like
adults.
a haunted
Go
house
nuts.
where it's like you're warned beforehand that there's going to be
May
disturbing
puke.
imagery that you could find offensive on the inside of this haunted mansion or whatever you're going to. You know, if it's 18 years or older and there's a warning about the content, then you're kind of going in on your own accord at that point in time that I could see some things that might be disturbing and I should be aware of that before I make the choice to go inside. But there's no choice with this situation.
Well, let's move away from this hanging. And instead, I want to talk to you about ghosts, hauntings, possessions, things that are only suitable to talk about this month, I would say. First, let me tell you, if I'm going to ask you your opinions on ghosts and spirits and all this stuff, but I want to let you know that a recent Ipsos poll conducted between May 18th and 20th of 2021 looked at Canada's thoughts and beliefs on the paranormal. And that survey revealed that nearly half of Canadians, 46% exactly, believe in ghosts or supernatural beings, while a further 2 in 10 or 20% are unsure, leaving just 34% of Canadians skeptical or not believing in ghosts. Does it surprise you that basically half of Canada believes in ghosts, the paranormal, the supernatural?
It doesn't surprise me, to be honest. And especially when the article breaks it down by the age categories, like the generations. You know, Gen X, millennials, whatever else you want to call it. It makes sense to me that the younger a generation gets, especially like Gen X to millennials to, you know, the whatever the other generations are called. I can't.
The shitty
the
ones,
stupid ones, the young dumb ones. It makes sense that like Gen X grew up on movies and television shows that were kind of horror genres and scary stories, like in movies and TV shows, more than the previous generation. Like if you look at the baby boomers, they didn't have access to as much kind of more gothic content, I guess, than Gen X or millennials did. And I think it's very romanticized in the culture of those generations. And like, look at, films like Ghostbusters, like what those generations grew
Poltergeist.
up on is very much ingrained, like, ghosts and spirits and the supernatural, and it's very much ingrained in us even when you don't even realize it. And for me, yeah, like, I'm open-minded to the idea of ghosts, or whatever you want to call what ghosts are. Leftover energy is kind of just how I think about it.
That's what I have a bit of a theory. I believe 100%. And my thoughts, like, to call it leftover energy, that's my thoughts. I feel like the difference between a living body of a human, let's say, or animal, or probably plant as well, the difference between a living person and a dead person seems to be like this tiny little zap of electricity that's enough to pump your heart, get your system started, make your brain operate. Like, there's just like, there must be some little dab of electricity that makes all that happen. But the way electricity works is it doesn't just like disappear. So when you die, the electricity is not in your body making things pump around or whatever, making things work. That electricity leaves your body and goes somewhere else. And maybe it just becomes static in the air, that makes someone else's hair stand up, or you get stuck to a balloon and someone rubs a balloon on their hair and then you're haunting their hair, that sort of thing. But I think there's something to do with like what happens to the electricity that's in your body when you die.
Yeah.
And I think if there's ghosts, like, which I think there is, I think it has something to do with that.
Right. It's energy is just redispersed, from one vessel to somewhere else, and then makes its way to wherever it lands. And I think you have this residual energy that can create what we see as ghost sightings. I don't really think they're, where sometimes people think of a ghost maybe intentionally haunting someplace, or like almost makes it feel like it's a choice or a planned action by this entity. But it's really, I feel like, just a ripple effect of this leftover energy.
Talking about that survey again, it's interesting. You say they broke down their stats and their results per age group. They also break it down per region. Oddly enough, 57% of Albertans, people from Alberta, believe in the paranormal. That's the highest of any region. And one other thing, that I think the biggest kind of difference in all the numbers when you break it down is looking at the composition of a household. If you have kids in your home, 58% believe in ghosts. If you don't have if you don't have kids, only 43%. So that's like, 15% more likely to believe in ghosts and the supernatural if you have kids. And I thought about that a bit, again, as someone with kids. And I think the idea that life continues after your death, I wonder if that hits different for someone who has kids that maybe has a bit more of a stake in longevity. That's where my mind went. God knows, but it's there's obviously a difference. 15% of every other way to break this down, that seems to be the biggest difference looking at those numbers.
Yeah. That's interesting.
I'll share the survey results in this episode description for the podcast for people who want to go through it, because it does break it down in a lot of interesting ways. And I thought, I don't know, I'm a bit analytical, so the numbers and stats are interesting to me. But let's get over to the end result of a belief in the paranormal, in the supernatural. If you do believe, then you certainly believe there are some damn haunted places in Canada. Have you ever been into a haunted house?
Well, not a house that I had any kind of proof was haunted, I guess, to put it that way. I've been in staged haunted houses.
Okay, like a theme, like a park.
But I was never in a house where I felt something is off about this house. It feels like there are spirits here, or whatever you want to call them. I've never felt that way about anywhere.
I've always felt like more so I feel an uncomfortable presence when I'm in the woods versus when I'm in a house. Like there's been several times where I've been alone walking through the woods at night. Um, and I've got the feeling like, I'm not alone. I don't know if it's a coyote or a group of zombies or what the heck it is, but that's where I
Yeah,
really get a
it's
weird sense.
zombie
But
coyotes that you're worried about there.
yeah, but any like old building, especially if it's empty, actually an eerie, this isn't a haunting, but I had a job once where I was kind of the last person in an office when the office closed at the end of the night. And I had a job where I was like one of the last, or was the last person who was in the office at the end of the night. And when everybody was out of the office, it was just this big empty space of a bunch of humming computers. And it was the eeriest thing because I could hear voices. And every night when I'd shut down the office, I was thinking like there has to be someone in here. Is it cleaners? Because I'm hearing people talking. But it was just kind of like within the white noise of the ventilation and the computers whirring and buzzing, I could just hear like human voices. And I've often thought like, what the heck is up with that?
Right.
But I don't think the place is haunted. I think it was just awful.
Yeah, you just hated working there.
Well, let's get into it. What I have here is a list of the top 10 most haunted places in Canada. And this list comes to us from Reader's Digest, the preeminent experts on haunted things.
Yeah. Whenever I'm looking for a scare, I pick up the Reader's Digest. I read a recipe that's just too complicated and I don't have the ingredients for, and
they do the order. They start with number one. You should never have a list that starts with number one.
Yeah, it's very anticlimactic. It starts at the top and goes, keep reading. It's going to get, more boring.
So for number 10, we're talking about the Maritime Museum of British Columbia. It's in Victoria. Here's what it says. The dearly departed seem to have a fondness for the city's cheekily known as the place. What? The dearly departed seem to have a fondness for the city cheekily known as the place for the newlywed and the nearly dead. Located in Victoria's well-known Bastion Square is the Maritime Museum of British Columbia, which was once the site of the city's jail and gallows. Some say that if you look through the windows at the museum's entrance, a shadowy, slender, Van Dyke bearded figure can be seen gliding down the main staircase. The mysterious apparition is thought to be the ghost of Sir Matthew Bailey Begbie, Victoria's infamous hanging judge. Doesn't do it for me. I think it seems to me that every museum has like a vested interest in being haunted.
Yeah,
so they can show up on these lists.
It reminds me very much of the Savoy Theatre in Glace Bay. I've worked there for years, and it's like that was always said to be haunted. This old, Victorian theater or whatever.
Like, said by the theater's PR department.
Yeah. Well, there was a photo one time of the empty theater, and all the empty seats in the stage, and there was this kind of shadowy figure that appeared midway in the seats, and it had a very slight resemblance to like a person standing there, right? But it's just, I'm sure any photographer will tell you how that can happen in a photo, a number of different ways, but people ran with that and always said that the theater was haunted. And, I've been there alone at times, late at night, many, many times. And it's not haunted,
Yeah, I think like the photo alone wouldn't do it for me. There needs to be kind of like a justification and a backstory. Like maybe if the theater had originally been designed and used for like a funeral home with a crematorium, or there's a graveyard. Like I'd like to hear kind of that.
Yeah.
If it's just we have this photo.
Yeah, we got this photo, and people have stories where they've heard things or whatever. It's a very old building. You're going to hear lots of different things. So,
well, let me move on to number 9 of Canada's most haunted places. This one is on the East Coast. We're talking about the West Point Lighthouse in O'Leary, PEI. The sight of a lighthouse bathed in pitch darkness conjures up all sorts of frightful possibilities. But rumors have long swirled that the first keeper of the lighthouse Willie, haunts the West Point Lighthouse Inn, one of Canada's quirkiest hotels located next door. Talk about a turn-down service you never want to get. I think any lighthouse, being on the water, generally they're really old, isolated. The fog rolls in. If there's thunder, I just picture them being kind of like facing nature. So I could see a lighthouse as being a place that would be evocative of the beyond. But again, this seems to be a story where the hotel next door is like, yeah, and that ghost comes over here.
Yeah, and he gets the happy hour special that we're offering tonight.
Let's go to number 8. We're going to Quebec City for a place called the Plains of Abraham. In 1759, British forces under Major General James Wolfe staged a 3-month siege of Quebec City, culminating in the Battle of the Plains of Abraham. Being the location of one of the most famous battles in Canadian history, it's no wonder that it's one of the most haunted places in Canada. With numerous sightings of ghostly soldiers appearing throughout the fields and tunnels, both Wolfe and French Major General Louis-Joseph de Montcalm died in the battle, and we can't help but wonder whether their spirits are still battling it out to this day.
Now that got a bit of
that does it.
That kind of checks your boxes.
Yeah, because there's a reason.
The battlefield type, dead fallen soldiers.
Yeah, an untimely death of tons of people in a dramatic, traumatic way. So, going back to what I said about like the difference between life and death, there's just like, 1 volt of electricity or whatever. The people who died in this kind of battle en masse, untimely, like I just feel like their energy or their electricity that's keeping them alive, it's like at its peak, it's going wild, they're fighting for their lives, and then boom, it dissipates into the sky or whatever. This would be a situation for me that it would stick around.
Yeah.
Or that
the
it could stick
recipe is
around.
there for what you're looking for a haunted area.
Also, the site it's still now just fields where these battles were, so it's relatively unchanged. So as you walk through those fields, if you know about this battle and what happened, I think it would also be easy for, theater of the imagination to bring you into it as well and allow those spirits to communicate with you.
Yeah, and I think if you can convince yourself that a place is haunted. I'm sure your mind can always bring you there if you want to go there.
Oh, certainly. And I think that's why the history is so important.
Yeah. It's easily
gives you the context.
You can easily convince yourself that an area is haunted if historically a lot of people died there.
Mm-hmm. And you're walking right where they laid.
Yeah. And yes.
So the next one is the first on the list that I've actually been to.
Oh.
Number 7 is the Hockey Hall of Fame in downtown Toronto, Ontario. Prior to serving as Canada's hockey shrine, this building was once a branch of the Bank of Montreal. Legend has it that a lonely bank teller named Dorothy took her own life after her romantic advances were rejected by the bank's manager. Dorothy's ghost is now believed to occupy the Hall of Fame, with some visitors reporting they heard inexplicable sounds of a woman crying throughout the building. So let's see.
I'm sure that's the current bank manager crying that they're hearing with the way the economy is going.
Yeah, that could be. As well as like when you go back in the day, it's the bank. Wouldn't it be like the bank manager that's making like inappropriate advances to like the underlings, to the lower?
Are you saying every
staff?
bank manager does this?
No, but I'm saying if you take 100 relationships that happened in banks 100 years ago or 80 years ago, whenever the Hockey Hall of Fame was at Bank of Montreal, I would guarantee you that a significant percentage of that is someone higher on the ladder making advances to someone on the lower on the ladder, especially if you're talking about a female receptionist. Like,
yeah.
I feel like...
absolutely. That would be probably quite commonplace.
Yeah, so I do not believe that story. Before I believe that Dorothy, the teller who took her own life because the bank manager turned her down, I'd like to see, an obituary, some information on who she is, maybe some contemporary reports of what was happening. but I think that may be hard. But I don't believe that story. I connect this back to what we've been talking about. Like, everything wants to be haunted.
Everything does,
even the
yeah.
Hall of Fame.
And the
Hockey
Hall of Fame has no need to make up a haunting story, though, because they're the Hockey
maybe
Hall of
numbers
Fame.
are.
That's everybody goes there for that reason. Nobody's gonna be like, I want to go see the Hockey Hall of Fame, but is it haunted? Because if it's not, I'm not gonna bother.
Well, what would attendance at the Hockey Hall of Fame be like in October? Like, do they maybe need a little October bump?
No, I think a hockey fan doesn't care what time of year it is to enjoy the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yeah, you're right. Number 6th most haunted place in Canada. I haven't been to this one, but I've been to lots of old spaghetti factory restaurants. Number 6 on the list is the Old Spaghetti Factory in Vancouver. It's been said that the ghost of a train conductor still haunts this popular eatery built atop an old underground railway track in Vancouver's Gastown neighborhood. Inexplicable cold drafts and mysteriously rearranged table settings are the calling card of the deceased train conductor. Making matters truly spine-tingling is a photograph of the 1950s era decommissioned electric trolley now featured in the restaurant's dining room. The photo depicts hints of a ghostly figure believed to be the train conductor standing on the steps of the trolley.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, are there pictures of this ghostly train conductor? Like, or is it just like, oh yeah, I saw him?
Yeah, there's a ghost, or sorry, there's a photo of a conductor on a train, but I don't know how that connects to it. I think what this is, I think, is maybe the restaurant could have a bit of a benefit of promoting the legend. So we got to consider that. But the idea that the restaurant is built atop a decommissioned train terminal, there's just going to be a lot of history. A lot of people have come and gone through there. If there's electricity in our bodies while we're alive, a lot of that electricity would have passed through that building, because a train station would have a ton of people moving through it day in, day out. So maybe there could be something going on here. I think I'm more willing to believe something built atop a graveyard, train station, crematorium, mortuary, funeral home sort of thing. I think that gets some bonus points.
Yeah, but it's just so weird. Don't you think that the train conductor, it was an underground train, right? Mm-hmm. So wouldn't he haunt underground? Why would he come into the spaghetti restaurant upstairs?
With the noise?
Keep it down, you're eating spaghetti too loud, you're slurping too loud.
The knives and forks on this, the cutlery on the porcelain cup.
Yeah. Stop enjoying your meal. I'm dead down here.
And yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's something going on, but I don't know if necessarily it was that train conductor. I don't know enough about it, and they haven't been able to, in that paragraph, make a compelling case to me that it would be the train conductor. But that said, so far, if I could pick a couple places that I'd go to, that'd be one I'd be interested in.
Well, the reason it would be nice to see is because I'd like to have some spaghetti. And then if a ghost shows up, cool.
So be it.
I saw the ghost too, but the spaghetti was great.
Let's go to Ottawa. Number 5 on our list is the Fairmount Chateau Laurier in Ottawa. Business tycoon Charles Melville Hayes commissioned the Fairmount Chateau Laurier, but died tragically aboard the Titanic just days before the hotel's grand opening in 1912. Hayes' spirit has since been rumored to be seen roaming throughout the property. Had we invested our time and money into crafting the lavish chateau only to die mere days before its completion, we'd likely be inclined to return as well.
I disagree.
No, you would be.
It wasn't like he was haunting a hotel that has been in his family for generations, or that he built when he was 20 and has run the place into his 60s or 70s or something. Like, this is just like, yeah, I just built a hotel and then,
or I'm building a hotel, but
then I died.
A lot of his attention,
and then,
a lot of his attention and brain power would have been on like making this hotel work. But then at the same time, he also would have been thinking a lot about his trip on the Titanic and the drowning. So why would he maybe would be busy haunting, the bottom of the ocean where the Titanic
Yeah, well, maybe
sits.
the bottom of the ocean, especially where the Titanic is a very busy spot for ghosts. Water
Yeah, he's like, I need
ghosts,
to get away.
water-based ghosts. But like, yeah, so like, are fishes ghosts too? And like, is that like, are there ghost turtles or
Ghost kelp?
ghost seaweed? You don't often hear of plant-based ghosts, do you?
No, you don't. That's like an untapped resource for the supernatural investigators.
I
out
would
there.
believe it, after Hurricane Fiona just ran through the Maritimes, I would believe that there would be ghost trees all over these parts now.
Let's go to number 4 of 10, the second on the list that I've been to. We're talking about the Keg Mansion in Toronto. You know the Keg
Yeah, I've
restaurant?
eaten at the Keg. Yeah, I've had some tasty steaks there.
The Keg is great, but in Toronto, there's one they call the Keg Mansion, and I'm going to read you the article. Today, it's one of many locations of the Keg Steakhouse franchise, but the legendary Keg Mansion on Jarvis Street in Toronto was once the private residence of industrialist Hart Macy and his family. As legend has it, in 1915, after the death of Macy's beloved only daughter Lillian, one of the maids was so stricken by grief that she hung herself. Another version of the story involves the maid killing herself for fears her rumored affair with a Macy man would be revealed. Either way, the ghost image of a maid hanging by her neck has been seen by more than one Keg visitor over the years.
Yeah.
When you go to that building, like they go in at the Keg Mansion to like get a meal, it's very creepy. It's a super old house, like all wood paneling and stuff inside. It looks like an old castle. It's a very eerie place. If you go in there and someone said, someone died here 80 years ago, you'd immediately be like, I got the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah.
Because it just got that vibe. I'm not surprised at all. It's haunted. I didn't know there was rumors it was haunted when I went there, and I remember I was there 10, 15 years ago, and I remember feeling kind of weirded out in there.
But if this place is truly haunted and it's a restaurant, like people would eventually stop going there. Like if they were legit seeing, what they describe in the article
as a hanged woman.
Yeah. You wouldn't.
Yeah,
the place wouldn't
imagine the
survive
reviews.
as a functioning restaurant because nobody's going to want to eat there if they see a ghost hanging in the corner, like a real ghost. Like it's not,
It is pretty freaky. Well, we have a haunted restaurant in Halifax that should be on this list. The Five Fishermen is a popular seafood restaurant downtown Halifax, long said to be haunted. I've heard 1,000 stories of things that happen in there from staff and guests and everything else. But but it has a great reason to be haunted. Is before it was the Five Fishermen restaurant, it was a funeral home that would have served the dead from the Halifax explosion as well as from the sinking of the Titanic. So a hell of a lot of dead bodies went through.
But the
there.
thing is the bodies are already dead when they're going to the funeral home. So don't you think the energy, depending on how fast they got the bodies to the funeral home, but don't you think the energy would lay where the body died or was killed?
Maybe, or maybe it's just slowly kind of like
It
almost
oozes
like
out?
static.
Like
well, it's just almost
ectoplasm?
like static that's like
Yeah.
kind of clinging to the body and it's slowly dissipating into the air or whatever. But I don't know. I think the Five Fishermen in Halifax is haunted, regardless. The Keg Mansion, maybe.
Right.
Let's go to number 3. The photo of this one very much is the typical haunted house. We're talking about the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel in Banff, Alberta. Though the Bates Motel in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho or the Overlook Hotel in Stanley Kubrick's The Shining thought that the Bates Motel in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho or the Overlook Hotel in Stanley Kubrick's The Shining were scary? Well, Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel is easily one of Canada's greatest hotels, but it's also rumored to be one of the most haunted places in our entire country. Built in 1888 by the Canadian Pacific Railway, this hotel is the site of numerous terrifying ghost sightings, including a bride who allegedly died falling down the hotel's marble staircase, and a retired head bellman named Sam McCauley who continues to haunt the hotel dressed in full uniform. This is a hotel that it looks like it's at the bottom of a mountain in the middle of the woods. It's giant and creepy. I'd say, without even knowing backstories, I'd look at it and be like, that building has a story. If that's true about the woman falling down the stairs while putting on a wedding there, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. That's a gruesome way to go too. For anybody that has watched the Netflix documentary, The Staircase, we all know that that's a brutal way to go. But maybe this woman who fell down the stairs was actually attacked by an owl.
That's a deep cut for the stairway watcher.
Staircase people out there, yeah.
Or staircase watcher.
Yeah.
Let's go to number 10. This is, I think, the second in Victoria. This is Craig the Rock Castle in Victoria. Built in 1890s for coal miner Robert Dunsmuir and his family, this Victorian-era mansion has since become one of the most haunted places in Canada. Rumors of a piano that plays by itself and sightings of a ghostly woman in white have frequently been reported. Many attribute the castle's supernatural proclivity to Dunsmuir's ultimate demise just a year before the building was completed. So this is another one where someone dies right before the building is complete.
Yeah, I just can't understand the motivation of them wanting to haunt that place.
You think they'd want its continued
I think they have
success?
other things in their life other than what they were working on just in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, go haunt your ex-girlfriend's house.
Or just like the place that you were living in when you died. Like, these people must have had a lot of...
you died. Walking down the street, hit by a car. This crosswalk is haunted by a train conductor who was off duty walking here.
According to Reader's Digest, the number one most haunted place in Canada is the Tranquil Sanatorium in Kamloops, BC. The word sanatorium is haunted. Here's what it says. The foreboding ruins of the sprawling Tranquil Sanatorium just outside Kamloops are straight out of a nightmare. Originally built in 1907 as a treatment center for tuberculosis sufferers, it later served as a mental institution before becoming ultimately abandoned in the early 80s. Echoes of its former residents seem to remain, however, as witnesses report off-the-charts paranormal activity, ranging from orbs to eerily disembodied moans. Before the pandemic derailed the 2020 to 2021 tourist season, you could tour the Erie location, surely one of the most haunted places in Canada, with a guide from Tranquil Farm Fresh, which now manages the sites. For the truly fearless or downright crazy, they even offer an escape room experience in the Stygian tunnels that link the various buildings on their property.
I don't think I'd be doing the escape room there.
No. This is another one that I think of. Any kind of former mental institution that was used at the time before we cared for, like, we don't care for our mentally ill now. In 2020, the treatment they would have gotten in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, I'm sure if we could see what happened in those places, asylums or whatever, the sight of what those people went through would probably haunt us for the rest of our lives, let alone the spot where it happened and they died.
And to have an escape room there that you go into and have to, I don't want to rely on my own wits to have to escape from a haunted mental institution because I'm probably not getting out.
And here's another thing. I think this one is like double layered because I think the building's probably haunted anyway due to its history. But then this group, Farm Fresh or whatever, that's running the escape room and all that, I feel like they're trying to like monetize the haunting. So they're probably hyping it up a bit.
And do you think they're angering the ghosts?
Well, I think it's just reckless. I think the building's haunted. You don't need to like, it's not like this hotel or this restaurant that you want to like every October get a little bump in sales. I think they're messing with something they probably don't understand.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Oh, they're going to hear from that train conductor. Wait till the train rolls into town. The real ghost shows up.
Overall, pretty good list. But I think that people out there across the country will likely have a better list. If we could hear from listeners of Keep Canada Weird who know something haunted in their hometown or the place that they're living that is better than this list, I'd like to hear about it. Both to talk about on the show, but also for my own interests. I'd like to, whenever I'm traveling, I always want to find like the cool off the grid little haunted thing and go there, whether it's a restaurant or a hotel. I'm a sucker for it. I will pay more to stay at a crappy, maybe haunted place than I would for just a nice bed.
Yeah. Maybe you should search out the most haunted Airbnbs in Canada and then do some of a cross-country haunted stay.
That's actually a good idea.
Thank you.
Hello, listeners. Sorry to pull you to the episode like this, but I want to tell you about something coming to the premium feed. As you probably can imagine, I get many more emails, voicemails, and messages than I have the time to respond to. The best way I can come up with to handle them is via a monthly episode where I catch up on my messages. On the evening of October 24th, I'll be recording the latest episode of Letters to the Night, in which I respond to September and October's mail. This month's mail primarily features comments on my coverage of Emma Filipov's case, the story of Lindsay Suvanarath, and a listener recounts yet another disturbing encounter with the Halifax glove guy. So if you want to hear this discussion and gain access to the full show archive, go premium at patreon.com/nighttimepodcast. And not only does the premium feed give you more of the show, it funds its creation. Now let's get back to the episode. Let's move on to the final act of the Keep Canada Weird Halloween special. I love a good ghost story. We've just kind of heard a bunch of mini ones, but none of them were like a full, complete story. Often on the show, I've called upon Steve Vernon, who's like a local writer, to tell me some ghost stories because he does an amazing job. And my prior Halloween specials will showcase some of his amazing work. But what I wanted to do this year is I've been thinking about this lately. I can't remember even what era this would have been. I'm thinking the 90s, maybe the late 80s. There was I think it was maybe monthly or maybe weekly kind of segment on the evening news, which they called Maritime Mysteries, and it was hosted by Bill Jessam. Bill Jessam, he almost did like, I don't know, maybe like the Poor Man's Unsolved Mysteries sketch or something, where he'd be walking with weird dramatic lighting, and he would just tell the story of like a haunted place, and maybe they'd interview a person or two that was involved in, living there or something. Do you remember the Maritime Mysteries segments?
Yeah. I remember seeing them on. I didn't really wait for it to come on, but, the news would often be on the TV in the kitchen growing up, as my dad is maybe, preparing supper or whatever. And so I would always just kind of see it. And it was always interesting, I guess. I don't particularly remember any exact episode, but
man, I remember a bunch of them. I used to, when it would come on, I loved it. I had a bunch of them recorded. I think my dad recorded them for me, and I would watch them just because it was, again, like Unsolved Mysteries, like this haunted place or whatever, but it was local. It was often Nova Scotia, PEI, Newfoundland. But I wanted to listen to one. I picked one, and I remember this one from back in the day. And it's the story that I know it as the floating coffin is the story. This is a haunting or like a ghost story from Prince Edward Island. So let's listen in on Bill Jessum's telling. And man, this guy's a great storyteller.
He is.
Rest in peace, Bill Jessum. He's passed.
Is he going to haunt us?
The waters that wash against the shores of Prince Edward Island hold forever the secrets of the strange tale of the seagoing coffin. If that is so, then let the journey begin to a place known as Fortune Harbor. The story of the seagoing coffin that began its odyssey in the Gulf of Mexico and ended up on a Prince Edward Island shore was reported in international newspapers and magazines, including Ripley's Believe It or Not. The central figure in this maritime mystery was an actor of the 1890s. He was tall, handsome, and magnetic. Charles Coghlan was the John Barrymore of his day. One report says he was born in England in 1841, while others claim Prince Edward Island as his place of birth. While doing research for an article on Fortune Harbor and Abel's Cape and its people, Adele Townsend discovered there was another group living in the area, actors and writers from New York City, and the main character was one, Charles Coghlan.
Yes, Coghlan was one of them. And he is the only one that has any marker today to mark that era, but there is a stone to him in Fortune Cemetery.
Charles Coghlan was the center of that famous colony. He was a darling of the female population, a rapscallion of the first order. While in Paris and under the influence, he married a young actress. He had a wife at the time back in New York. While appearing on stage in Galveston, Texas in 1899, Charles Coghlan collapsed and died before reaching hospital. Against his wishes, he was buried in a Galveston graveyard and not Fortune Harbor. The following year, a violent hurricane swept in from the Gulf and claimed over 6,000 lives. The flood that followed washed most of the graves into the Gulf Stream, including Coghlan's coffin. For the next 8 years, night and day, and in every kind of weather, Charles Coghlan's coffin simply disappeared somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico, or so it was thought. Believe it or not, the coffin bearing the body of Charles Coghlan drifted eastward in the currents of the Gulf Stream, up to Florida, Massachusetts, and Maine coasts, and into the waters of the Northumberland Strait. The coffin then drifted in the waters of Abel's Cape to the beach of Fortune Harbor. Two fishermen who came upon the coffin were somewhat hesitant. Should they or should they not open it? Curiosity got the better of them. Charles Coghlan's wish was finally granted. His coffin carried him home to the island he loved, 3,000 miles from where he had been buried 8 years earlier.
That is folklore, yes. And Harry Burke was an older man, quite an older man, when I moved to Fortune here. And he had stories about that coffin coming into Fortune Bay, Fortune River. It seems a bit hard to believe, but there were lots of stories of that type at that time.
And there are other people who live along the shores of Abel's Cape who swear the story is true. Adele's husband, Cliff, who grew up on the Coghlan tale, says it's an attraction and one of the best maritime mysteries.
Oh, it is. It's an intriguing story, yeah. That's why you're here, I guess.
Out of all of these confused accounts of fact and fiction, the legend makers have woven together in the folklore of Prince Edward Island the mystery of the seagoing coffin.
That give you chills?
Chills? Honestly, no, not really. I don't really get chills from stuff like that, I guess.
I don't know, I get swept up in those stories. And just the idea of this one seems believable to me. There's the love story of Coghlan and this woman. He's living in PEI. He dies somewhere else. He's buried somewhere, I'm guessing like near a shoreline. A hurricane sweeps through. Some of the graves are kind of dumped into the water, which is something that happens a lot. His coffin somehow manages to float all the way from the New York area right up the coastline to PEI, where he turns up.
It's
on
a
shore.
super cool story. I really like the way it plays out, and I would like maybe who would be an expert on this to maybe get into the science behind it, like maybe the possibilities of the journey of the coffin, like how likely it would be to end up back in PEI. Like, you know what I mean? Like what expert would that be? Someone who would study streams and
like currents and flows and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But then it would also have to be someone who can then scale back to we're talking about the 18 whatevers.
Yeah.
So that may make a challenge, but you hear of both sides of this. You hear of graves being dumped into the water due to erosion and all this stuff. That's something that happens a lot. In bodies washing up on shores is something that happens a lot here on the east coast of Canada. It's like, we're famous for Oak Island, and a lot of the rumors about Oak Island is simply just a collection of things that just washed up there over the years, are being dug up and looked at in interesting and unusual ways. I think that, whether or not that is what happened, I think it is possible. Like we could get someone to look into it, and I don't know if anyone definitively could say 100% possible, 100% impossible. I think it's always going to be a little bit left to the listener to tell. But ultimately, as far as a ghost story goes, I think this has all of the kind of trappings. It has the love story. It has a reason for him to want to get back to where his coffin gets. The imagery of the coffin floating across the ocean for days on end, weeks on end, to ultimately land near where his lover was, only to be reburied there. I don't know. I like it.
It is a great story. It's great. And it's you have to kind of wonder, is it a little too good to be true? Right?
It's definitely got the air of folklore.
It's a fun story, and do I believe it? If I were a betting person, and I had to make a wager on is it true or not, I would probably, if I was placing money on it, say that it's not. But
there may be some truth to it, even if it isn't true. Maybe a body washed up on there,
and a coffin did wash up. Was it him? I don't know.
I think it's 100% true. As told,
not a single stray fact. Just completely solid from beginning to end.
Yeah, that wasn't storytelling. That was journalism.
That was not fake ghost news.
Aaron, let's start wrapping this up. This has been a wonderful Halloween event to share with you. I can't wait to see what we do for Christmas.
Another costume episode, maybe.
Santa. We both dress as elves.
Well, hopefully one of us is Mr. Claus and the other maybe Mrs. Claus.
Oh,
that would be
fun.
nice for the two of us to have that kind of.
It'd just be a different take on our relationship.
I think so, or just more of an accurate take on it,
or just the next step,
or just yesterday's step.
For people who are listening and not watching, we are in costume. Aaron is a very feisty devil, and I am a lunatic wearing a balaclava. I don't know what I call this costume other than I often use it to freak out my kids.
The Awful Father is the name of your costume.
Aaron, I hope you have a happy Halloween.
I hope you do too. And Jordan, until next time, watch out for train conductors. Choo choo.
To all the listeners, we hope you have a happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Scary laugh.
I want to thank you for helping Aaron and I keep Canada weird, but let us also call out to you for even more support in this mission. If something unusual happens in your town, make sure you let us know. And the best way to inform us is by sending us a voice memo at nighttimepodcast.com. We hope to hear from you. But before we part here, I'm going to give some thanks. A big thanks to Aaron for sharing another moonlit evening with me and with you, the creepy listeners of Nighttime. A big shout out to the internet's favorite haunted cult leader, Unicole, who supplies the intro and outro voiceovers for this series. And lastly, but most importantly, I have a massive thank you to everyone who listens to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. But with that said, keeping the show alive is, and it has always been, an uphill battle. So if you want to help take a bit of weight off the show's back, make sure you're listening on the premium feed. And not only does the premium feed fund the creation of the show, it'll give you more of each topic than you'll find on the free feed, as I'm adding exclusive content regularly, and I maintain a full back catalog of episodes only on the premium feed. So for both the price of a cup of coffee, help keep the show alive at patreon.com/nighttimepodcast. And with that said, let me thank the newest subscribers, Danielle, Christine, the Jedi Master Kara, and Heather J. Thank you for your generous support. And for anyone else who'd like to help support the show, you can keep Canada weird by sharing this episode on social media and letting like-minded friends know what we're doing here. If you have any story ideas, want to give feedback on the show, or simply want to send us a voice memo, you can do all that and more at my website, nighttimepodcast.com. We hope to hear from you. But until then, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and have a happy Halloween.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte. Copyright Jordan Bonaparte.
Bud, are you excited for Halloween?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? What you gonna dress as?
Harry Potter.
Yeah? And are you gonna do magic?
Yes.
Do you got the dorky little glasses? And do you got the ridiculous cape? The more important question is, how much candy are we going to get? And the right answer, there's only one answer. Too much. How much candy are we going to get?
Too much. Radical. I'm not a teenager.
All right. Well, my boy just wanted to wish everybody
Merry Christmas. Happy Halloween. That was close.
That was a close one. All right. You can get up there.
Happy Easter.
Happy all sorts of things.